Hey there, folks. I just wanted to preface this tutorial really quickly. I've been editing it, and it's a long one. It's a lot of time. You can see from my face, I shaved my beard in the time that I actually recorded this to the time that I'm editing it now. But what I wanted to say was, it's long because what I decided to do with this tutorial was take you through each piece of the code and kind of, hopefully, at least, illustrate why it actually works. I could have just copied and pasted the code. I had it in another document that was on a different monitor, and I'm reading through it as I'm typing it. I could have just copied and pasted. I could have just copied and pasted whole chunks and just said, here's what you do. But I wanted to go line by line and build it in such a way so that hopefully you would get a chance to take a look at how that code gets built and how it affects the pieces in Unity. So I build the code, and then I go back to Unity, and then I go back to Visual Studios, and I really just wanted to go back and forth in order to illustrate how the code works piece by piece. I understand if that's frustrating for some people. Hopefully for some of you it won't be frustrating. Hopefully for some of you it'll actually be a really helpful experience. So I understand this is a long one. Skip ahead if you want. I apologize. I know that sometimes I have a tendency to ramble, and people will tell me that. I tried not to ramble too much with this, but I really did try and go line by line and take it very specifically. And I hope that it's beneficial for you. And if it is, please subscribe. Please give a like. I spent a lot of time on this one, and it's hopefully going to be detailed enough to help some of you really figure out some more of the how the coding actually works and how it's applicable to the character that we've been building in some of the previous tutorials that I've done. So that being said, we'll dive right into it. But again, if you skip ahead or anything like that, I completely understand. But it would probably be beneficial if you watch the whole thing. I get it if you don't have the time, and that's the beauty of the internet and YouTube, is that you can skip ahead, right? So but yeah, I just wanted to say I understand this one's longer, and hopefully it's worth the time for you. Okay. So if you've been following along in my other tutorials, this is part 4. This is where we're going to bring everything together and make our player character actually function the way it's supposed to. We're going to take all the animations and all the components that we built together in the last 3 steps, and we're going to bring it all together and make our player character here. Now, a couple of things. First off, we're going to be doing our own controller script. There are controller scripts in Unity. They're probably better than mine in many ways, but the reason why I'm going to do my own controller script here is because I'm trying to teach you how to call the animations, and it also allows you to tweak some things. And so I apologize if you're a coder, if you're really good at code. I am not good at code. I'm not bad, but I'm also completely self-taught. And by self-taught, what I mean by that is I went on the internet, needed to do something, found out somebody who had figured a way of doing it, copied and pasted, and kind of smushed different ways of doing things together. I've never taken a class in C#. I've never done anything like that. So the way that I do these things and the way that I code is probably not all that correct, but pieces of this will help you kind of figure that out. Now that I've scared everybody away, I do believe that this is a good introduction into coding with Unity. So that being said, follow along. We'll go from there. So we're gonna get into Unity. I've got my character, and if you remember, we put a camera in the character, and we attached it to the head bone. So if I hold Alt and click on the triangle here in the hierarchy, it opens everything that's underneath that. And if I can just collapse the clavicle here, then I've got just the clavicle and the thighs, then I've just got the neck and head, and here's my camera. If you don't have that camera attached to the bone on the head, you should do that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start our script. This is assuming that you have everything else finished. So you've got an animator controller, okay? You've got the colliders, you've got everything on there. So we're going to take our rigid body, and with this code, we are actually going to use our own gravity. So we're going to turn gravity off in the rigid body. And then I'm going to say apply all so that that copies on down to the other prefab that's in here in the thing, in the project folder. So now I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create a C# script. And this is really important. When you name these scripts, you have to name them and then keep the name the same. And the reason why, well, actually you don't have to. You have to know what you're doing if you change the name. So we're just going to call it first person controller. I am going to do a demo on a third person controller. It's a lot more complicated. So we have a first person controller, and you're going to hit return, and then you can double click and open this in Visual Studio. When this comes into Visual Studio, you'll notice one of the first things is, you get all these things. You'll notice the public class is the same name as the file that I've just typed in. If I were to go back into Unity and change the name here, you would start throwing compiler errors in the console. And the reason for that is because this class has to be the same as the name. So I basically just try and make it a rule of thumb to never change the name of the file after I've done it. And sometimes you have to. So understand that that class has to be the same as the name of the file. Most of you are probably like, yeah, duh, I know that. Okay, well, if you do, then you're doing pretty good. So here's what we're going to do. First, we have to start with some variables, and these variables are what is going to allow us the ability to control the speed, the motion of the player, get the angle of the mouse, and everything like that. In Unity, we do have our character controller on our prefab variant, and so that's actually going to really take care of a lot of the movement for us, especially the interaction with WASD. So we're going to utilize that and use that to our advantage, but we're still going to kind of take control of it with our own script here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a public float, and that public float we're going to call player current speed, and this is going to just read our current speed for our character at that moment. We're going to use this just to start out with. And I actually started with a value. Sometimes you wouldn't do that. You would do it in another thing. So then we have another public float. And actually I made a public mostly because... why didn't that come through? I made that public mostly so that I can do testing. Later on, I might make these floats private so that they're not showing up in the inspector, but we'll actually go over that in a little bit here. And so this one is player walk speed. Now this one I would want to have public so that I could change it later on. Whoops. Why? Then we're going to have a backward speed. So player walking backwards speed. Because I don't think that the character should walk backwards as fast as he walks forwards. Have to add that in there. Let's go here. Okay. And then we're going to have a player run speed. And I did it again. I keep getting ahead of myself and forgetting to write in. There we go. And then we're going to have a jump speed. It really doesn't like those being there. Huh. And then we're going to have a gravity. So we're going to go why did I do that? So we have our own gravity. So this is why we turn gravity off in the rigid bodies. We're going to have our own here. And so I put in a sensitivity factor for the mouse because I found that if I just did things standard, it was too slow. So I have a basically it's a multiplier for the mouse, both vertical and horizontal. And you can tweak that as well if you want to. And they're both set to 10 at this point. Okay. I'm giving up hitting the tab on these. I'm going to do them as a group later. So this, I made it public as well this time. And the reason why I did that is so, again, we can test. This would probably be private eventually. Later on, I'll usually make that private. Yeah, no, private, float, mouse angle, X. So this is going to be the angle of the mouse in the X-axis. And this will be the mouse angle in the Y-axis. I'm not commenting these out. I do have them all commented out in my example script. So then we have private float horizontal direction. And this is the direction of the character itself, which is a little odd, or was odd for me, but at first. And then finally, here's our vector 3, which is going to be the move direction. So after we start pressing button, when we press like W, that's going to move us forward, and it's going to change the vector 3. So this is our new vector that's going to allow our character to move about in space. Got my fingers off on the wrong buttons there. So we have to name our character controller. So here's our private character controller. And then we also have to name our animator. Oops. And then lastly, actually I'll put these up here. I like to group things a little bit differently here. Player jumping. So we're going to have a private boolean and then another private boolean. Player grounded. So those two booleans basically are to tell us if the character is jumping and or if the character is grounded, and those two will switch on and off depending upon what we want. And a lot of these are going to we're going to use the drive direction, but many of them we're actually going to use to control our animator that we have on our player character. So if you take a look at our where is our animator? Ah, there it is. I'm not used to the new icons yet. So if we take a look at our base layer, and here's our base blending tree, and actually we look at our parameters, you can see we've got forward motion, side motion, jumping, dying, and aiming angle. Now the dying's not going to come in until later once we do a script for the player's health, but the aiming angle, the jumping, the sideways motion, the forward motion, those parameters are all used to control not just the motion of the character in space, but also the animations that we've been bringing into this. So let's just keep on going here. Well, we've already got an error, but that's okay. So now that we've set up our variables the way that we need to, what we're going to do next is we're going to initialize a lot of them. So we're going to sit here and we're going to say, well, the first thing that I like to do, Unity engine dot cursor dot visible, okay, and we're going to set that to false. Whoops. So what that's going to do is it's going to turn off our cursor, so that any time that we're at any point in time that we're playing the game, I guess it does want it this way, whatever. At any point in time whenever we're playing the game, we don't want the cursor around in the middle of the screen. So that's gonna help us there. So now we're going to go player character controller, and we're gonna set that get component character controller like this. And so what this is going to do is this is going to tell our code what the character controller is. This script is going to be attached to the player prefab. So it's just going to look on the player prefab, find the character controller, and that's what it's going to use to help us with our motion. And we're going to do the exact same thing. Player animator equals, and that's exactly the same idea, get component so that's going to then set our animator. And if you want to make sure that this is working right, you just set these to public, and then when you hit play for the first time, it should go. So, and we can even do that. So let me just make these public. The danger in making them public for anything else is that you can really kind of screw things up. So we're going to go back to Unity here, and I'm going to take my script that I've got going on here, and I'm going to put it on the variant. No, what? We got a console. Person control identifier expected 5. You know what that might be? I have occasionally run into problems with numbers in the names. I'm wondering if that might be it. So let me just go here and rename this. So I'm just going to illustrate the technique here. So now I've got first person controller. If I double click that, see my public class is exactly the same. If they were different, I would be in a lot of trouble. So now let's see if I can take that class and drag it onto my variant, and I can. So that was the problem. I just totally forgot about that. But you can't have a number inside the name of your script. So here we've got our script, and you notice because those are public variables, the character controller and the player animator, nothing happens. But if I take this and I hit play, I should see those two fill in. So you see, I see player character variant and the player character variant here with the animator. Both of those are filled in, so that means the script has been able to go onto the prefab and it has grabbed these components, the character controller and the animator, from the prefab, and it's going to be able to use those for its motion. So let's just save, and let's head back over to Visual Studios. So now that I've got those, let's just take those back and make them private again. We don't really need those out there. So now let's continue. Let's continue on. You know, I just don't like this. I like them tabbed over, and I don't understand why it's doing this. So anyway, so now we're going to take this, and we've gotten our player animator. So now we're going to set our player current speed, and we're going to make it equal to our walk speed. Now that does not mean that the character is going to start walking as soon as you hit play. It just means that the speed that is set when you hit W for the first time will be the walk speed. And that works out really well. That allows it just to kind of jump right into that. Let's see here. So then we're going to say our mouse angle X is equal to 0.0f, and our mouse angle Y is also equal to 0.0f. Whoops. That should be a decimal point. Okay. Then we want to make sure our booleans are set to their default, which is player jumping false. And we want player grounded, believe it or not, set to false as well. So that way, when we start the code, it's going to set player grounded equals false, and that's honestly really important. And lastly, we want player aiming angle set to 0. So now we have basically started all of our variables off the way that they should be, and now we're ready to start doing the major work here in the code. So the first thing that we're going to do in the update is we want it to constantly be testing to see if our character is hit the ground. So we're going to do an if statement. If player character controller dot is grounded. Now I've had problems with is grounded before. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I have yet to figure out what the cases are for it not working, but there are times when it just fails. And actually what it does is it like cycles over and over and over and over again. Is grounded, not grounded, is grounded, not grounded. It's like it's arguing with itself or something. I don't know. But it just does that. So anyway, but we're going to assume that it's going to work. I think it has something to do with the character controller. It's been documented on the internet a lot. So, but anyway, so here we're going to have, so player grounded, okay, is going to equal true. And player jumping is going to equal false. So it's just that simple. So now, whoops, we're going to go down here and we're going to send in an else. So if the player is not grounded, then player is whoops. Okay. Now I can see this actually being a little problematic because I'm really setting just a very basic binary option. You're either jumping or you're not. And I can see that for some more complicated games, that could actually be a problem. You might want to build in something that's a little less, you know, yes or no kind of an option. But for us, for now, that's what we're going to do, is we're just going to build this in as your character's either on the ground or they're not. And if they're not on the ground, then they're in the air and they're jumping. And this is really for our animation more than anything else. But anyway, I can see where some people might not like that. We're going to go with it for now. So once we're done testing with that, then the next thing we want to do is we want to test for our inputs. In other words, the idea is the horizontal and vertical directions, so side to side and up, or side to side and back and forth. That's different than the up and down. What you're really looking for is W and S. So that's your horizontal directions. Oh, actually, no, I'm wrong. It's your horizontal and vertical directions of the mouse. So your horizontal directions of the mouse would be like rotating the character, and the vertical would be the up and down. And we'll get to how we're going to use those, but we want to test for those right at the beginning of the update. So however many cycles per second the processor's running, what is that, like, thousands and thousands of times per second, it's going to constantly be testing this these two states. So we're going to say horizontal direction equals input dot get axis, okay? And then we're going to parentheses, quotations, horizontal. Nice and simple. Semicolon, next line. Vertical direction equals input dot get axis and vertical. So this is going to get our horizontal and our vertical, okay, for us to continually test. And it's important that we put it here right at the top, because the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be choosing our side motion, which is actually a horizontal. So I was wrong about that. So we're testing next, we're going to be seeing, are we moving? And that's our horizontal direction. So I'm going to say if horizontal direction, oops, see, I totally did it wrong. Wrong button. Parentheses. If horizontal direction is greater than 0, so that means we're moving, okay? Then our player animator set float player side motion to horizontal direction. So let me take a second and explain what I just did here. Oops, I forgot my quotes. Okay. Stop, you. Okay. So, here's what this is doing. If we go back to Unity, in our animation controller, in our animator, we have a parameter that's player side motion. See this? If we go back here, whoops, needs capital. So if we look at this, then what's happening is it's going to set our player animator set float player side motion. So it's going and it's going to set that float that we have here in the parameters for the animator. It's going to set that equal to the value that we're getting out of horizontal direction. Now here's why this works. The horizontal direction is getting our input, our axis, horizontal axis, from the character controller. And the character controller is basically allowing us to use WASD. So if I take a look, see, vertical direction and horizontal direction, are those public? They are private. So let's turn those public, and let's look at what's happening with those. So I'm going to take both of those and make those public. And then let's just comment this out for a second here. And save. So now what we can do, oops, let's close. We're going to collapse these. So now we can take a look here, and you can see horizontal direction and vertical direction are right here. So if I just hit the, let's take the animator and drag it down here. So now I can see my parameters, and I'm going to hit play. And so you can see my horizontal and vertical direction are both set to 0. If, however, I go forward, I just hit the W key, notice that my vertical direction goes from 0 to 1 immediately. And you'll notice it does nothing down here in the player forward motion. However, if I hit the D key, notice my horizontal direction goes to 1. Now nothing's happening here. If I hit the A key, you'll notice that it goes to -1. Now this is what's really, really cool. So if I go back here and I say if horizontal direction is greater than 0, notice I didn't say greater than or equal to 0. So I uncomment this out and I hit save. Let's go back in here. Yeah, I know. So I'm going to go back in here, let it re-import. Now, when I do this and I hit horizontal direction, look what's happening both. Okay, we'll do this again. So first, horizontal direction here. See, the horizontal direction now goes to 1. But if you look down here in the parameters for the animator, my side motion now also goes to 1. And if you look here, you can see the slider in the blend tree goes over. See that? And if I click the blend tree, you can see it live update here. Well, it's not doing it. But if I then take this and split screen this so you can see my scene, now my character is doing his strafe animation. Now he's not moving. He's not moving anywhere. He's just staying still. We haven't changed our vector 3 yet, but you can see him doing the animation that I set in Blender for him. So this is actually the basic principle of how you do all of these animations. If the horizontal direction is equal to 0, then your side motion, or your player side motion, which is your parameter in the animator, is then equal to the horizontal direction that's being called out of the character controller. If you didn't access the character controller, then this wouldn't work. If you didn't access the animator up here in the start function, or the void, then that also wouldn't work. So you have to have all this kind of set up first, and then you can start really having fun and playing with your animations. So let's keep doing it. Let's do both strafes things now. So then I'm just going to add a simple if. And this is where my code gets really unelegant. I know that there's ways of doing it with another if or I don't know. I'm sure there's much better ways of doing this. So if horizontal is equal to less than 0, okay, then our player animator dot set float player side motion. I mean, really, I could build this in, and then I could do if horizontal direction is less than 0, and then it's equal to 0, but they're all basically the same thing. So instead of doing all these ifs, I can make this a lot more simpler and just say horizontal, or actually just do this, player animator dot set float player side motion horizontal direction, semicolon. And with that, in one fell swoop, I'm always setting the side-to-side animations to be equal to the speed of the horizontal axis. So then, let's just go back here. If I'm doing nothing, my guy doesn't go anywhere. If I go to the right, he's going to the right. If I go to the left, then he's going to the left. And because we haven't put a new vector 3 on there, which is what's going to actually move our character, then nothing happens. But I'm not worried about that yet. I'm more worried about just getting the animations done, because believe it or not, the vector 3 is actually really, really simple. So now that we have that done, now we need to test for our vertical direction. And this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. and also probably where my code gets even more inelegant. So I'm going to say if vertical direction is greater than 0. So in other words, we're moving forward, right? Oops. That parenthesis should be inside there. So if the vertical direction is 0, then our player current speed should equal player walk speed. And our player animator sets the float player forward motion. Oops. Can't have that. And that's our vertical direction. So now we've set our walk speed to the player current speed equals the player walk speed. So once we add the vector 3, we'll actually walk forward. But we've also have our vertical direction set to our forward motion here. So let's save this and let's see what happens when I hit the W. So if I go here, whoops, let's click on our. So you see the horizontal the horizontal and vertical direction. Trying to, well, let's unpause this for a second. There we go. So I'll hit it again. So now I'm in there, and if I go side to side, you see my horizontal direction goes to 1. I go to the left side, okay, so I hit A, now it's -1. If I go and hit W, now I'm going to go forward, and you'll see the blend tree works, and the forward motion parameter here, which is a float, works. Now if I hit S and try to go backwards, you'll see the vertical direction goes, but I'm not actually calling that into account because I don't have, I haven't put that into the code yet. But see, the walk animation actually works. So now I'll just do another if statement. If my vertical direction is less than 0, oops, then my player current speed needs to equal player walking backwards speed, because I want that to be a little slower, and my player animator set float player forward motion. And I know we're not going forward, but I needed to name that parameter something, and I named it forward motion. That's really inaccurate. Now, let's see here. Boom, boom. Okay. So now I've got this, and there's a reason why I'm doing this in 2 separate if statements as opposed to what I did with the side motion here, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. So, in fact, what I could do is I could set it to equal to or less than or equal to. So I can set that a less than or equal to because we have to have the forward motion separate because we need to run shift. We have to have the running part of the animation. So now I should be able to go here, hit this. My character is standing still. Now the character is walking. And then now the character is going to go backwards. Strafe, strafe to the other side. So essentially right now, I mean, I've already basically done it. I mean, I've got my character essentially all set, but I just don't have the motions and I don't have running. So Let's go back and let's add our run. And like I said, this is where my code starts to get a little inelegant, but it's the way that it worked for me. So so now here under the if vertical direction is greater than 0, is the character so as my comment. If the character is moving forward, now we need to test for shift. So I will do another if statement. Yeah, a two if statement within an if statement. I love if statements within if statements. So if input dot get key then you're going to do a key code dot left shift parentheses and then another parentheses to end the if statement, and then here comes our function basically, player speed or player current speed equals player run speed. In fact, now that I'm looking at this, what we could actually do is we could essentially just kill this. I'm going to cut that out of there. I'm going to put it right here. And then, so we're going to do the if statement there, and we're just going to get rid of that player animator. I hope that doesn't come back and bite me in the butt. I'm changing what I had planned on doing here. That never works very well, but we'll see what happens. So we have the if there, and then what we're going to do is we do an else. So else there, and we take this, cut, and we paste it right in here. So essentially what we're just saying is, if this is happening, oh no, you know what? That's right. No, I forgot. I forgot part of my code. Okay, so I do have to do the forward motion in the code here, and I will show you why. So I have to put this in here, and put that in there, and put that in there. And the reason for it is when this is set, we're going to set the current speed to run speed. But the thing about the forward motion is it's getting the vertical direction. The vertical direction is still 1. So in order to work with our animator, we actually have to multiply it by 2. So let me show you the mistake here. So if I go here, and I hit play, and I'm walking, and I hold shift down, nothing happens. Nothing happens. But you can see the player current speed goes up to 18. Now the character's not moving right now, so we don't actually see the increase in speed, but the character would increase their speed moving across the map. The problem is the animator doesn't change, and the reason for that is because our horizontal, our horizontal motion here, our forward motion, is always going to be set to 1. Do you see? No matter what. So in order to get it to register the running, I have to set it here. I have to take this and multiply it times 2. Now that I've done that, let's go back here to my character demo, and I hit play. Now watch. Walk, shift, run. And you can see over here in the vertical direction is still 1. That's just my keystroke in the character controller. But now my forward motion is 2, and the blend tree has bumped it up to the running animation. I let go of the shift key, and he goes down to the walk animation. Now run, now walk. Now, one of the things that you'll notice about this is that this is a very, very simple transition. It's on or off. So I'm walking, and then I'm running, and then I'm walking, and then I'm running. And you can see it just shifts from one to the other very quickly, instantaneously, really, which creates kind of an animation jerk of sorts. You can ramp these values up, which I've started playing with a little bit, so that your character slowly starts to run. I can show you that in a different demo. I just wanted to kind of get this started. So now we're basically getting really close to being finished. Well, kind of. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add, okay, so here, now one of the things that I like to do is just for myself, I will do end update, just so that I can kind of keep track of the major functions. If I'm getting into something really complicated, I'll really go and you know, end is grounded. Like, I'll keep track of everything so that I know where they end and where they don't, because that really helps me, at least, especially when things get complicated. So now we've done our vertical direction. And I've got a few notes to myself. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do our jump. So I'm going to say if player grounded is equal to true, player jumping equals false. Now, in later code, as I've tried to start working on this, I've actually replaced this boolean with a float in my animator, and try to start ramping jumping to the walking and running and stuff like that, and it's kind of cool. But for now, we'll just set that. We'll set that there. So if the player is grounded, then it's true, and player jumping is false. And our move direction equals transform. Well, actually, let's not do that yet. So just player jumping is false. Okay. Okay. And inside this is where we're going to actually put our new vector 3. So the idea is, if you're touching the ground, your character should be able to run. But I don't feel like the character should be able to change in direction in midair. So if the character is jumping, then there's no changing in there. So now we'll have another if statement. If input dot get button down jump, and that's important, player grounded equals true. So this is really important, because if you don't do it this way, then your character can jump multiple times, which just makes a mess. Really, you don't want that at all. So if input, oh, I forgot a parentheses there. That's why that was there. So if the input get button down jump and player grounded equals true, now we can actually jump. So boom. And then we're going to go player animator dot set bool player, oh, what was it? I think it was player jumping. Yep. And I didn't do it right. true. And then what we need to do here is probably have player animator dot set boolean So now we're setting our Boolean player jumping as false, and then if we hit the spacebar, jumping is true. So let's test this and see if this actually works. Oops, my first error here. Really? That's simple? 88. Yeah, that's simple. Forgot a semicolon. Hate that. And actually, you know what? It's kind of funny. I could do this in a number of different ways. Whoops. In fact, you could even do it this way. I believe. It's still a little redundant, but that's okay. So now let's just see what happens here. So let's go back to our animator. Let's look at our parameters here. So what I'm noticing is he's not jumping. And I can't tell if he's grounded or not, because that variable is private. So we need to go public on player grounded. Alright, so let's see what happens here. So there we go. Boom. Player jumping is on the whole time, and yet it's not working. So two things are happening here. Number one, this little fancy thingamajiggy here is not working. So we'll just set these to false and true that way. So now if I go back to Unity, player jumping is still not being called. Oh, because I'm not grounded. That's right. So this proves what I was saying. So I didn't even think about this. So it won't jump because my character isn't grounded. So that means that you can't jump and then hit the spacebar and jump again and then just keep going higher. So what we really need to do in order to test this out is now we need to add our gravity. So what we're going to do here is outside of all this here, I'm going to add move direction dot y minus equals gravity times time. That is not what I wanted to do. Time dot delta time. So what this does, constantly moves character downward in y-axis by gravity variable. So we set our gravity variable, and you can see up here it was set to 20. So by doing that and setting it to 20, we now take our move direction down, and so it's constantly going to be moving our character downwards at that rate. So now if I go back here to Unity, for the first time when I hit play, our character should drop down, and then when the character's feet hit the ground, he's going to stop. And he didn't. So now it won't work. And is grounded is not working. Oh. I forgot a line. So in order for that to work, yeah, duh, I haven't actually done a move. So player character controller dot move direction by time dot time. Whoops. Delta time. So now the character is going to move in the direction that the move direction is set, which for right now is only going to be in the Y. So we'll go back here, let it import that in, hit play. Now our character falls, and you can see the player is grounded. You can see the player is grounded. So I hit the space bar, and he jumps. But he's not, he's immediately going, I saw the check mark go there for a second. He's immediately not jumping again. You can see it happening because he's not actually going up in the air and then coming back down. So we're not really seeing anything happen. So if we go back to our player jumping here, if we want him to jump, what we actually need to do is set our move direction up. So I'm going to say move direction dot y equals player jump speed, like that. And so that's going to change our move direction here to the value that you see up in our variables. So it's save. Let's go back to Unity. And now our character jumps. Now what's interesting is our jump animation is actually not happening. Let's take a look. Let's try this again. You can see the transition's not going here. See, that's happening, but the animation's actually not playing. So that's a problem with my animation. And we can tell that because we should see this going. So if I just don't do anything here and click play, no, it's, oh, yep, see, you saw that go forward. So know that something's, there he is. Oh, it's going. Something's messed up with my animation in Blender. I have to go take a look. When it does that, usually that means the animation's too long. Something's wrong with my avatar and the animation. But you can see that it's essentially working. So now let's finish off this code because I know that you're probably like, oh my gosh, let's just get it done with. But I'm trying to do this. I could just do the code for you. But what I'm really trying to do here is I'm really trying to show you how it's working and why it's working so that you can develop your own if you want to. So now we have, let's see here, we did player character controller, player, okay. So now what we need to do is we need to set up our move directions for our actually like moving around side to side. So like if I go back here and I hit W, you see he's still not moving. He's still not moving, along the terrain. So what we're going to do is right under our if vertical direction is less than or equal to 0, we're going to get to, actually we don't need to add spaces. If the player's grounded is set to true, this is when we want to actually have our character moving around. So in this part of the if statement, okay, we're going to set another move direction. move direction equals a new vector 3 input dot get axis horizontal. So this is going to take our horizontal, our W and our S, and our vertical here. So 0 is our y-axis, horizontal is our x-axis, and then our z-axis is input dot get axis vertical. Boom. And then move direction equals a transform, just like we did before. Transform direction and then lastly we set it to the current speed. So now what we're doing is we're setting up a new vector 3. We're getting our input axis horizontal and vertical, which is our WASD here. Then we're transforming the direction, so we're setting the new vector to whatever those axes are saying that they are. And then finally we're going to move direction and multiply it by the current speed. So that means any changes are going to then get multiplied by the current speed, and we're going to move forward. So having put that in there, hopefully this will work. You never know, right? Now my character moves forwards and backwards. But notice as I move the mouse, he doesn't turn. But he runs. So there's no turning. And the reason for that is I haven't gotten my mouse angles in here. So just before this, we want to calculate our mouse angles. So I'm going to go mouse angle X equals input dot get axis mouse X, and we're going to multiply that by the horizontal mouse sensitivity. Okay, and this is cool because then we can kind of adjust our sensitivity of the mouse, and if you wanted to, you could even have the player even control that. So now we have mouse angle Y equals input dot get axis mouser mouse Y, and multiply that times the vertical mouse sensitivity and so now we've got that, but that's actually not going to rotate our character. So if you take that, we're just bringing those in and putting them into a variable. If I go back into Unity, you'll notice nothing. So as I move the mouse around, nothing happens. I can still move forward and backwards, but I can strafe. Oh, that looks horrible. We need to speed those animations up. But he's not actually rotating. And so that's actually where we need another another thing here, so or another control down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to say player character controller dot transform, and this time instead of a transform in the direction, we go transform dot rotate, and this is going to allow us to rotate our character. And we're going to rotate our character. We don't want to rotate it around the x-axis because x is a horizontal axis. We want to use the mouse angle X on the y-axis, which is our vertical axis. Boom. And so now this should allow our character to spin around. See, around that axis. So that's actually looking really pretty good. And so now I can move around and have my character walking just like he should. Okay, so now, last thing that we're going to do tonight with this is we're going to adjust the angle of our upper body to be able to aim up or down. So if I just do this right now, you can see it's kind of like, if I move the mouse up and down, nothing. I can spin around and I can move my character, albeit kind of slowly, but that you can change. But I can't aim. I can't aim up or down, and we've set that all up. So all we really need to do, and we've set it up on the code too, because we've grabbed our mouse angle Y here for the sensitivity, and that's our vertical mouse movement, essentially up and down. So really all we have to do now is put another transform in here. Actually, we're not even doing a transform. We're using our animator. So we're going to go player. Whoops, I hit the caps key. I hate that. Player animator dot set float. Okay. Parentheses. Player aiming angle. Player aiming angle. And so now what we're doing is we're setting the float that is in our animator for the character to equal the number that we have set up for our mouse. And this is where the sensitivity can come in real handy depending upon how you want to do this. And you can totally adjust these. So let's just click play, and I should be able to, and it's not working, of course. See the player aiming angle variable over here? It's not moving. So something is wrong with my code where it's not moving. So let's go back and take a look. I'm not getting any console errors. So player aiming angle is a float. Player aiming angle, player aiming angle. I think, oh, yes. I know what I forgot. So what I forgot here is I forgot to actually set the mouse angle into the aiming angle variable. So this variable here, I forgot to set it up. So that's just my fault. So in order to do this, what we need to do is we need to say player aiming angle, okay, is equal to, and this is where I'm going to add it to itself so that it's constantly descending or ascending. So plus mouse angle Y. Oops. So here it's going to add or subtract from itself constantly. So if I save that, the real question is player aiming angle, it is public right here. So now we should be able to see this go up and down. And look, there we go. Now that clipping that happens, that's part of the camera, and we can control that pretty easily. But you can see now that the whole body is then taken over and my animation starts to move. Or moves the body and aims the head. And this is why it's really important to have that camera attached to the head bone. If the camera is not attached to the head bone, then you won't look where the head is looking. And that's, again, something that you can control very specifically in your animations. So that's where you go back to Blender and figure that out. And I'm going to have to go back to Blender anyway and figure out why my jumping animation's not working. And I also have a little glitch in my idle animation, which is kind of weird. But essentially, I have everything set up. Now that I've kind of got that, I would actually probably go through and I would set a bunch of these back to private. And the reason for that is because I don't want to really mess with them too much. So I would get a bunch of these, set them back to private. We don't need to see that. Once I'm done kind of doing all those, I don't need to see the aiming angle really. The mouse sensitivity, yes. I don't need to see the booleans. The gravity, I could play with that, so I might leave that public. All these speeds I would definitely leave public. And the sensitivities, I mean, yeah, so I would just make everything else private here, save, and go back. And now I essentially have a workable first-person controller. And like I said, there's some things that I might do, like not have it just immediately jump from walking to running. The other thing that I would probably do is I would probably increase the speeds. So you can see it kind of looks like he's floating a little bit. So that's where the speed of the animation's not really great. So that's where you go into your blend tree. You click here and you have your walking animations right here. And I set it to 0.75. So I might go back to 1. And then I would save and test. That looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. Now, one last thing before I go here. You can see his feet. You can kind of see his feet going through the floor. If that happens, what I've found is really kind of interesting is once you have a collider on your character. So if you take a look at my player character, I have those colliders on his feet. Now I would put a lot more colliders on there, but what I found really interesting is it actually it sets the depth by which it's letting toes and stuff like that go through the terrain with the bottom of the capsule of the character controller. So what you might want to do is actually drop it down just a touch. So 5.10, maybe a little bit lower. Yeah, let's try 5.0. Whoops. Okay, save. And let's see if that allows a little bit more of a natural looking toes. If you go too far, then he'll float. Yeah, see, he's floating a little bit now. It's not horrible, but it is. You can definitely see it. So it's interesting how, if you notice the previous demo, without the colliders on the feet, the capsule collider doesn't register as a collider with the terrain for some reason. But now, with that, you have other issues of the fact that if the capsule collider is actually what Unity uses to calculate the where the feet are. That looks a lot better. Still going through a little bit, but not too bad. Really, I should probably work on my animation and get those toes bent a little bit more when he's going through the walk. Other than that, it looks pretty good. So that's basically it. So feel free to embellish upon the code as much as you want. This is, like I said, very basic. There's a lot of things that I'd rather do, like ramping. The animations aren't quite smooth. There's a lot of room for growth here, obviously, and for improvement. But this would at least get you started and allow you to have your own controller that you can control gravity on. You can control how high the character jumps, how fast they move, how fast they walk, run. All that sort of thing is all based in those variables that we've set up. And you can control them in here. So that's one, I guess, one last thing. I keep saying one last thing. You don't need to go into your code to change the walk speed. If you want to change the walk speed, you just change it in here, right in the inspector. And that will allow you to make your character walk faster or slower or whatever you want to do right from the inspector without having to worry about going to the code. That's the benefit of a public variable. The negative to a public variable is you could change it without knowing, or somebody can screw around with it depending upon how you do the game code or whatever else. So you just want to be careful with that, but at the same time, that is the beauty of having a public variable, is now I can change it from within the inspector. I don't actually have to go into the code. So, all that to say, I know this has been a long one, but I hope that this has helped you kind of take a look at how the code works in Unity, how you can create a character controller, and how you link the animations that you've built in your Blender file and then brought into your prefab, how you can control those with the code. If there's a way that I can do the code better, please leave a comment. If you like this or this was of help to you, please give it a thumbs up, give it a like, click the subscribe button, and help me out a lot. I spend a decent amount of time on these videos, and that would be very helpful. And share this to your friends or anyone else who might be interested. That would also be very helpful. Thank you, and have a good night.